Gonorrea.
Ojo. Puta, llegó la policía, Dios mío.
Hijo de putas con metralletas malparidos sapos. Dios.
Están disparando a la gente, salieron a disparar. Están disparando. Están disparando. Le están disparando a todos los manifestantes. Esto es bala.
Es lo que va ahí, mira.
Alejandro, ayúdame a compartir. Le están disparando a todo el mundo, Alejandro. Están disparándole a la gente en Junín, ayúdenlos. Están disparando. Están disparándole a la gente. Están disparando con metralletas. La policía está matando a la gente. Están matando a la gente. Están disparando a la... Están disparando a la...
Hey, comrades, and welcome everybody to this, this update, another update. We've been
Oh, you broke up.
doing as much as possible. Are we good?
Yeah, you're good.
So yeah, we're doing our best in terms of keeping Western and English-speaking people, particularly those of us who are of Colombian descent, but also allies and anybody interested in the urgent and very upsetting and violent situation that our country is going through. We do this to inform, to I guess share the information, to inform people of the situation, but most importantly, we do this to gather support, solidarity for Colombians back home, both in terms of morale, but most importantly, tangible, concrete support in the form of funding for protesters, for legal defense on the ground, for those who are involved in helping protesters in terms of their health and safety, medics, and so on. So as you can probably see, and I hope you can see at the bottom of the screen, we have a link to our GoFundMe for our organization's Red Condor Collective, and we're hosting this live with Anticonquista, which is a sister organization. We have more followers on this platform, and that's why we do it through Anticonquista, but we're organizing as Red Condor. Also to say that we do want to support all organizations that are doing work. We're not the only ones who are supporting from the West. We welcome all of our comrades, our friends who are doing tangible things to help out, to leave a comment, and we will try and get those mutual aids and fundraisers and events and rallies that are going on. We can advertise those as well. But just so quickly, what we're going to do is I'm going to give a quick, brief update on the situation. And then after that, myself, Nick, and Samuel are going to, have a conversation based on the facts on the ground. What mainstream media won't tell us. First of all, obviously to those who don't know, Colombia is going through a really terrible situation at the moment because of a bill a proposed bill that was going to be passed by the Colombian government. Ivan Duque's right-wing, extreme right-wing government. And what the bill was proposing was the rising of taxes for millions of people, mostly working class people, and as well as the hiking of prices of basic food products and household products, which in the middle of a pandemic is ridiculous. And of course, as soon as the people got wind of this, they organized a strike on the 28th of April. Especially young people, students, who are always the front line, not just in Colombia, but everywhere, the front line, the people with the most energy, I guess the section of the population with the most energy to go out and have a strike. What followed was, verified reports of people being killed, of people being maimed, of people being shot in their eyes, and as well as other types of repression, like the imprisonment of protesters, and as well as the disappearance of protesters. So we have cases of unmarked police cars, unmarked vans taking people, and so we have a few people disappeared. In fact, I think there is 56 confirmed disappeared people, thousands of injuries, 26 confirmed deaths, and nine cases of sexual abuse by police. So this is, and again, this is just confirmed cases. We're talking about way more than this. Just they aren't the official number at the moment. And then so the situation at the very present, at the moment, is that because of days of protests, young people as well as the general public being on the streets from the 28th of April, the government has decided to send in the military to places like Cali. Cali is like the epicenter of the situation at the moment. We have the airport in Cali being completely shut down, and it's running solely as a military base for the Colombian military sent by the government to dampen the protest, violently dampen the protest. And so we have our comrade Samuel is going to give a more detailed report, but in Cali we have reports of helicopters all over the city, detonations going off, so bombs coming out of the helicopters. We have reports of military units in neighborhoods shooting at people, and we have that's verified through videos that people have probably seen in social media. There's also reports of I'm not sure if you guys have seen, there's a video of a bus being tear gassed by the police, which is highly dangerous. People could die from that. Tear gas in general is dangerous. It messes up with your eyes and your breathing in a outdoor space. So imagine in an enclosed space, it's even more dangerous and could kill somebody.
I think we have that video, Carlos. You want to show it real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Venían civiles y los bombardearon.
Okay, so that's the terrible situation that Colombian people are going through for standing up against this bill. The latest, I think it was yesterday. I'm not sure, was it yesterday or the day before that? The Ivan Duque finally, because of the protests, decided to announce that he was backtracking and that the bill was not going to go ahead. But the people have continued to protest because, and it's important to emphasize for those of us in the West who are planning to take action from this, it's important to emphasize that it's not just that bill that we're protesting about and that people on the ground are protesting about, but the entire system, the governmental system, the economic system, the whole structure, the whole system in Colombia is not running as it should. The government, the economy, the political system should be at the service of the people, but in fact is at the service of a minority of the ruling class, of the elite, of the capitalist class. So it's important to highlight that the struggle isn't over, and particularly to do with this event, the bill, even though he's backtracked on the bill, what needs to be understood is that he plans to propose a new bill, which is going to be worded differently, but in effect, in practice, is going to be much of the same. He says there's going to be consensus in passing this new bill, but what he means by consensus is gathering the ruling elites, those who run the country, to propose a new bill that will confuse people because it will sound differently, perhaps, but it will be the same. So that's where we are at the moment. The situation in Colombia continues to be grave. There is a total and complete militarization of the country, particularly places like Cali, the main cities, where young people, students, as well as the indigenous people who have traveled from their areas, their communities, to come and help out, as well as the leftist movement in general, the activist movement in general have joined. So this is really and truly a historic moment, something that can be compared to other protests in the past, maybe the battle of 1970. What was it, Samuel? 1976 or
77?
77.
Yeah, September 14th, 77.
1977, as well as the Bogotazo in 1948, when Jorge Gaitan, the radical liberal presidential candidate, was killed. So we're living through a historic moment, and it's important for us to kind of garner this energy, harness this energy to bring about, I guess, help bring about a new society. So with that, I'd like to open up the conversation to Nick and Samuel. I want to introduce Samuel, who is an academic, and he's an activist with Red Condor Collective. He's in charge of giving our study group, of leading the study group that we have every so often to understand the history of our country. But right now, we're gonna, I guess, dibble and dabble into both the details of the situation at the moment, as well as more historical context. So yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos, for that. I think that's a great introduction to everything that's going on in the country. I wanted to add a few things about the reasons why people are protesting, putting their lives on the line, because the situation right now is something that, like Carlos just mentioned, we haven't seen in Colombia, perhaps since 77. Perhaps it's even greater today. It's something that our generation hasn't seen in Colombia, and a lot of that's due to the repression that the Colombian people have felt. And so one of the things is in regards to the bill, the Reforma Tributaria, the bill that the tax bill that the president was trying to pass. Like Carlos said, they have announced, because of the protests, because of people putting their lives on the line, they have announced that they're going to take off the bill and they're going to remake it with consensus with parties and the people, or whatever lie they want to say at the moment. But today we're receiving news by two Congress people, Caterina Miranda and Cesar Pachon, denouncing that as of today, May 4th, the bill has not been removed from Congress. The legal process necessary to remove it from Congress hasn't been done. An official letter has to be presented by the Minister of Finance to be able to get the bill removed from Congress, and that no letter has been presented. There has been no legal process to remove this from Congress. And so that's one thing that is very important to mention. And I think, this is news that are coming out today. So many people in Colombia are finding this out today at the same time that this is happening. As well as there's another reform that they're trying to pass, another bill that they're trying to pass along with the tax bill, which is the health bill. And this health bill is probably one of the most dangerous ones that they are trying to pass. Obviously, the tax reform is a huge issue. It's horrible. It's only gonna benefit the elite class, the governing classes. But this health reform is really dangerous for the country. And basically, the main parts of the health reform, the health bill, is basically to privatize the whole health system in Colombia and make it very similar to what they have in the U.S. And one of the things is that the hospital systems, the insurance systems are going to be handed to multinationals. And this health bill wasn't one of the things that was being mentioned as a big issue in the country, because a lot of people don't even know that this is happening. So this health bill was trying to be passed under the table, trying to be passed very quietly. But a lot of people on social media are coming out explaining this health bill for people to get their knowledge about what is really going to do for the country. And Colombia, one of the most, another thing that I wanted to, so apart from those two things, I think another reason why people are putting their lives on the line in a country like Colombia, where you get killed for defending rights, for being an activist, is people are fed up. And a lot of people don't understand the context of Colombia. Many people inside of Colombia don't understand the critical situation that Colombia has lived. So I wanted to give a few figures that are very important for us to keep in mind about why people are out in the streets, why they're, even as though Cali is completely militarized, why people are still going outside, creating front lines. And so one of the numbers that I wanted to mention was that according to the United Nations in 2019, from 1985 to 2019, Colombia has 9 million displaced people, internally displaced people. So people inside of the country that have been displaced. This is not counting people that have left the country due to the conflict. This is people that have been displaced inside of the country and that have had to move somewhere else from where they were displaced. So that figure of 9 million, that's the largest figure in the whole world, according to the UN. And this is something that many people around the world, many people in Colombia don't know, but they live that reality. And so this is why in the cities like Cali, Bogota, we have this city where in one part of the city, you're living like you're in the US, you're in Miami, you're in New York, in the rich neighborhoods. But then 10 minutes away from that, it's a completely different reality. And those are the people that have fled the rural areas of Colombia because of the displacement. And that is a figure of 9 million from 1985 till 2019. And so this isn't taking into account the displaced people from last year and the displaced people from what has gone on in this year, which is in the thousands. Another figure that I wanted to keep in mind as to why people are out in the streets and is related to this displacement, to the system that Carlos was mentioning earlier. According to La Universidad Nacional, Colombia is the second most unequal country in Latin America after Honduras and the 7th most unequal country in the whole world. And so along with this displacement, we have this extreme inequality in the country, where, like I said, in one part of the city, you're living like if you're in Miami, and another part of the city, it's a completely different reality. And another figure, which I think reflects the militarization, the reality of what people are living in cities like Cali, is that since the 1980s, and this is by the Centro de Memoria Histórica, the National Center for Memory of the Conflict, there has been more than 2,000 massacres in the country since the 1980s. So that's another thing that we have to keep in mind. And so people are out on the streets putting their lives on the line because these people have been victims of this. These people have been displaced and have had to go through the cities. And the people that are out putting their lives on the line are these people that have suffered all of this violence for decades now. And I like to think of Colombia as this olla de presión, like a
pressure cooker.
Yeah, pressure cooker. That is just waiting to explode, and we're seeing that right now. We're seeing that right now, with people going out, no matter the situation. And so I was. Do you want me to go into kind of more of a what's going on in Cali specifically right now?
Before we go into that, Sam, just to pick up some points, and also to talk to the people who have just joined us, and kind of explain why we're doing this, live now, giving this update. Most importantly, what we're trying to do here is inform people, the English speaking world, those of us who are immigrants, Colombian immigrants, Latin American immigrants, allies, and those who are interested in Colombia, give an update of the situation, both a detailed update of what's happening on the ground, but also as Samuel has been doing, giving a broader historical background, a broader political background to the situation. Why now? Why is it happening? So we would encourage people, as hope. I hope you can see at the bottom of the screen, there's a link to our GoFundMe, or you can also find it at Red Condor Collective social media. In our bio, you can just click on it and help us. That the funds collected in that GoFundMe are going to go directly to the people on the ground, the people who are doing the work, the people who are leading the struggle. I guess you could call an uprising, or perhaps even a revolution. Hopefully, a revolution. And it's going to go straight to them. We're not an NGO. None of us receive wages. None of us receive a salary. None of us receive a cut from what's raised. Everything, absolutely every penny goes to comrades in Colombia, those who are doing work on the ground in terms of legal defense, medics, and so on. And as we said at the beginning, we also encourage people to send in their own GoFundMes, organizations that are doing work, and we're more than willing to publicize those as well. We don't pretend that we're the only group doing work here in the West, in the UK, or in the US. Also to say, no, actually, I'd like to introduce Nick, who's our co-editor at Anticonquista, to maybe, he's not Colombian. He's here helping us with the technical background things, the videos and so on. But Nick, he's a well-educated activist comrade, who's in solidarity with us, and from a broader diaspora perspective, from a broader Latin American perspective, what does it look like to you, seeing these images? Because one of the issues with Colombia is that, especially for those of us who are progressive, or I guess more particularly as socialists, we think of Colombia as this like very conservative country. We're seen as like the Israel of Latin America, and that's like the last place you would think of for an uprising or a revolution. And now we're seeing, those of us who have our ears to the ground, who understand the situation on the ground in Colombia, know that for decades, since from the beginning of the last century, we've been fighting. Our people have been fighting back the government. But this isn't widely known, even by our own people, but even more so by people outside of our country. So what do you think as you're Puerto Rican and Dominican in the United States? What does it look like to you, as someone from the outside?
Well, I think the comparison between Colombia and Israel is a pretty good one. And I think that's usually the clearest way for people on the outside, like me, to understand it. But I would say one thing about Colombia, unlike Israel is has a, I would say I'm gonna say it has a monopoly on violence in that region, right? The Israeli state has you know, if we're being honest, a lot more firepower than, you know, the Palestinians who are fighting against the Israeli state. In Colombia, I think what we see is historically it's been a lot less stable than Israel has. This isn't the first time that these uprisings, at least I know, or like y'all were saying, it's not the first time that they've occurred, and I don't think it will be the last time. I think that what we see in Colombia is kind of like a failed project of the U.S. It's like a U.S. base, but the U.S. doesn't have full control over the territory or the people like it does in Israel. It doesn't have, you know, advanced weapons there, which can easily kill or destroy these protesters. You know, compare this to the Israel-Palestine situation again, and you'll see that there's clearly one side which has, you know, tanks, drones, all kinds of ballistic weapons, opposing a side with not nearly as much firepower. In Colombia, you don't really you have that in this instance with the riot police and the protesters, but you also have groups that have the potential to actually fight back almost on equal footing with the Colombian government. And Colombian government too, the other issue is the Colombian government, unlike Israel, whereas Israel has control over its own population, the Israeli Zionists, Colombia doesn't have control over the Colombians, right? Specifically the government. Not many people are really aligned, at least from my perspective, not many people are aligned with the government. So, you know, I think it's interesting that all of this is happening only about a week after, in the U.S. at least, a report came out that, what was it, 2 years ago, when they were trying to push humanitarian aid across the border from Colombia to Venezuela, and they had that big concert. A report just came out saying that that was not actual humanitarian aid, that turns out that of the 360 tons, only 9 tons, I believe, made it to Venezuela, and the rest were shipped to Somalia. So it was, you know, clearly, as we were saying at the time, it was clearly a fake, you know, fake humanitarian aid. It was more so for humanitarian intervention. And I think that was interesting that you know, that was with the aid of the Colombian government and the paramilitaries, and now it's turning back on Colombia. You can't expect to support the United States and for a long time without the support of the people within that nation. You know, at some point they're going to want to take it back. So I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that kind of poetic justice, if you will. But I guess the questions I would have some questions for y'all specifically, in regards to, I guess, comparing the what we've been hearing more so in the mainstream, and like first of all, what we've been hearing specifically. I've seen a lot of reports that say like people are trying to blame either the guerrillas, the ELN, or the FARC, instead of blaming the government, or the government is trying to put the blame on the guerrillas rather than than themselves. That's popular in Western media. And also, what I guess that would be my first question, and my second question, I'll give it to y'all after you answer that one.
All right, thank you, comrade. And you know, just to pick up that thread on misinformation, like what happened at the border with Venezuela and Colombia, where, you know, supposedly it was aid going into Venezuela, and it ended up elsewhere in the world. That information, the propaganda, right-wing propaganda, capitalist propaganda, imperialist propaganda, plays a huge role in how we see and how we perceive Colombia and Colombia's, I guess, social struggle and political struggle. To give a, you know, very, I guess, relevant example is, there's reports of a hotel in Cali which was set on fire, and the media was blaming it on the protesters. Of course, you know, taking the opportunity the mainstream media was blaming it on the protesters. And it's difficult to verify and to say, you know, it wasn't the protesters, because they are setting things on fire, not necessarily hotels, but things like police motorcycles or police and government buildings, which, you know, and some will say, and that I would put myself in that you know, I think it's justified considering the context and the situation. But a hotel is kind of like, why would you set a hotel on fire, but possibly putting people's lives at risk? It turns out it was actually the police who set it on fire to create an atmosphere of, a further atmosphere of repression and justifying their role and their, I guess, violence against the protesters. So yeah, that's just one example, one recent example of how the media confuses people and confuses, especially for those of us who are, abroad, who might not have access to alternative media, alternative voices on the ground.
And real quick, we have that video if you want to show it, just to show where the evidence comes from.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so we could play that real quick. Let me.
¿Por qué tiene lágrimas en sus ojos?
Porque yo soy un hombre muy sensible y estaba aquí con mis hijos ayer. Casi nos queman vivos ayer. Dentro del hotel con mis hijos, Miguel David, Juan Carlos e Isis. Por eso estoy llorando. Porque fui portero y aseador en este hotel. Fui portero y aseador yo en el año 78, 79. Y hoy en día soy defensor de derechos humanos. Soy profesor de la Universidad Libre hace más de 20 años. Fui profesor de la Universidad de Santiago hace 16, enseñé 16 años. Erasmo de Rotterdam dice una frase hermosa.
Yeah, so there we see for the people who might not understand Spanish, this is a man who's upset because was he a hotel worker or he is a hotel worker now, but he's also a university lecturer.
Yeah, so I wanted to explain. So the video, it seems like that video doesn't cover the whole video that was online, and the whole video online goes on after that part where he explains that he's a human rights defender now. He used to be a professor. He used to work as a watchman at the hotel, at that same hotel. He was staying at that hotel during the protest yesterday in La Luna, which was one of the hottest areas yesterday. And he was explaining how he was seeing the uniformed men come into the hotel, stealing things, and then setting it on fire while they were inside. He's saying that he's going to go to the judicial system to go against the state, because they were trying to attempt against his life, the life of those that were inside, and the cops stole his son's motorcycle while they were inside. And so that's what the rest of that video explains afterwards.
Thank you for that, Sam. And
I just wanted to add a quick thing on that question that Nick had of the misinformation. And I think, as Carlos mentioned, that's a useful weapon for people outside, but a very useful weapon as well for people inside the country. If you talk to a lot of family members in Colombia right now, a lot of people are confused as to who's doing what. And that also makes people be like, okay, well, these protesters are kind of, going overboard. Let's not support them anymore. And the government has to do that because they know that over 75% of the population is in accord with this paro nacional, with this national strike. And so they have to create this confusion. They have to disseminate this misinformation in order to quell the people. And to make them confused and not want to be joining the protest, because the protesters are bandits that are burning down the city.
Yeah, and to pick up the thread that in the question that Nick was asking, that the guerrilla is often blamed as being the kind of instigators of violence and at these protests and just in general in Colombia, the guerrilla is used as a scapegoat to justify police violence, police repression, military repression, killings, disappearances. The guerrilla, without going into, historically, it's important to understand. A lot of us don't understand because the guerrilla in Colombia is like it's a taboo. It's difficult. It's a difficult situation to have. But just to quickly say that the guerrilla started off in the late 1950s, early 60s as a campesino movement. Campesinos who were fed up with the government repressing them and so on. And in fact, many of the campesinos were indigenous people, indigenous leaders who were suffering violence at the hands of landowners and so on. And so the guerrilla movement from its beginning has been justified, in the opinion of many of us who analyze the situation, has been justified. Why is it that the government are the only ones allowed to use violence? And when people defend themselves, they're called terrorists, vandalos, and so on. It's a complicated situation now, but basically the FARC, which are the biggest and most effective guerrilla in Colombia, demobilized, signed the peace process. There was I think 17,000, maybe as big as 20,000 members in 2016, and the vast majority of them demobilized, and I think only like 1,000, maybe a couple of thousand stayed in the jungle armed. So to blame the guerrilla now in this particular moment is ridiculous. First of all, because they don't have the power, and second of all, because it decenters the actual actors, which are the Colombian people, the common, ordinary Colombian people. We're not even talking about activists here. We're talking about the general population. Even Uribistas, we were saying this in our last live, that even the Uribistas, I have Uribistas like extreme conservative right-wing Colombians who support Uribe, one of the more recent right-wing presidents. Even the Uribistas have been out supporting the protests. So it just shows that to now come and blame it on criminals or to blame it on the FARC or on the guerrilla, it just doesn't hold with reality. It's bullshit. It's propaganda.
If I could add another thing about the situation and the type of protests that are going on, they, like you were saying, Carlos, a lot of the acts that have been done by the protesters, which, like you were mentioning, some burning of some major offices, there have been banks that have also been burned. But I would also, not to justify violence, but I think it has to be kept in the context, of what we're talking about, of Colombia, of these people that have had no answers for decades, man, that the extreme inequalities, the extreme repression, the extreme violence that the state has done in Colombia is sometimes unthinkable. The forms of torture that the paramilitaries, along with the Colombian state, have done in the country. There's another statistic over like 78 or 80 something % of all tortures in Colombia have been done in the armed conflict by paramilitaries or the state forces. And these type of tortures are tortures that you used to see in the Pinochet eras, and some of them even to the type of tortures that were done during the Nazi era in World War II. We're talking about putting live people in burning furnaces. This was a practice done by the paramilitaries to disappear bodies and so we have to keep in mind that the response of these people, the response of the Colombian population, can be kept under this logic necessarily of walking and marching with signs. People are just completely enraged, especially with all these information coming out with social media and people finding out all the lies that they've been fed by Caracol and RCN and El Tiempo and all the mainstream media. People are fed up, they're opening their eyes, and a lot of the responses can be kept under this logical way of thinking, and a lot of times there is some sort of response that people can't understand. Like, for example, there has been burning of different bus stations in Cali and other cities, and a lot of people just don't understand that. But the majority of people haven't lived the situation, the desperate situations that that the Colombian population has felt. The population that is a lot of times, which a lot of times, like we just mentioned, is the police doing it, is the police paying people to do it. But I think also we have to keep in mind that the responses by these people that have suffered so much violence, by the Colombian population that has suffered so much violence, can't necessarily be kept under this square of logical response to repression.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sam, and also to say that, you know, to give a more precise example is the recent protests, the recent strikes that have been organized in Buenaventura, on the Atlantic coast of Colombia, Pacific coast of Colombia, where the majority Black population of that city, that port city, where the majority of wealth in Colombia passes through, lives under, you know, the most terrible conditions, you know, without access to healthcare, you know, people dying on the doorsteps of the facilities that aren't really facilities because they don't have the proper equipment to deal with people, with lack of schools and education and resources for those schools, and so many other, you know, just a general impoverished life that people face, both because Colombia as a state and Colombia as a nation is racist, and because the people in Buenaventura are Black, but also because the ruling elites are capitalist and they don't care about poor people. They don't care about the majority of people, but especially you know, these communities, these Black communities, indigenous communities, and so, you know, and then again bringing it back to what can we do practically to help the situation, because it's not good enough for us here in the diaspora in the West, in the UK or the US, to be informed. To be informed is, you know, I guess the first part, but the main part is what are we going to do about it? In Buenaventura, just to give an example, what we've done is we've sent thousands of dollars, and for those of us in the UK, thousands of pounds, to comrades in Buenaventura to alleviate the situation. Our very close comrade and I guess the most well-known activist in Buenaventura, Leonard Renteria, who we have a close relationship with, has been doing work in Buenaventura, and we've been helping him, sending him funds so that he can provide essential basic household products for those most in need, as well as helping pay for things like banners, T-shirts, things that they need for the protest that they have there. And we've also donated to some of the comrades in Buenaventura who, you know, in Buenaventura, in just 1 week last month, 12 people were killed in just 1 week, 12 activists and 12, you know, just because of the very violent situation that the city faces. And because of that, we have also sent money to some comrades to be able to leave town and find safety in outside of the country, as well as in other parts of the country. So this is just, you know, some of the work that we do as Red Condor Collective. We do broader work in terms of Anticonquista. You can Google us and find out about us, maybe DM us. But particularly for Colombia, we do this kind of work, and now in the protest, we're also, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, there's a link to our GoFundMe. I think so far we've raised nearly £3,000, which I'm not sure at the exchange rate, but last I checked, we had raised something like 14 million pesos, which you know, it's a good amount. It's a good amount for to support the comrades who are doing the work on the ground. So, you know, please keep your donations coming. And at the end of this, we're also going to give details of what other stuff we can do in terms of rallies that are happening and other stuff that we could do for the situation.
What are so I have one more question too for y'all. And I wanted to say real quick, I think what Samuel's point was with the in terms of just like the justifications as to why people are going out there and doing what they do. I think it's good that we brought that up because you already know that the liberal response really is going to be the liberal pacifist response is going to be that no one, any kind of violence on the part of the victims, on the part of the protesters is always going to be bad, right? It's sort of this sort of victim blaming mentality where even if you're facing, no matter what kind of repression, what kind of violence you might be facing, trying to defend yourself is out of the question. Clearly, that's not the case, especially when you're talking about real issues, real problems, real oppression that people have to deal with. They're going to respond however they need to respond to stay alive and survive. So I'm glad you talked about that and mentioned that, because that's something that I think around the world people have an issue, specifically liberals, put out that propaganda saying that, let's all just be pacifists when you can't, right? That's being political. That's choosing a side. That's choosing to do nothing. My next question was, and you kind of touched on it. It's interesting, Carlos, you mentioned the Uribistas who are out there in solidarity almost with the protesters, right? So these are one right-wing faction versus another right-wing faction, right? So my second question was going to be what, I can imagine a scenario where Duque, who's the president now, if I'm correct, right? Where he gets, let's say they want to get rid of Duque. This has been going on too often. This is too problematic. And they replace him with, let's say, another conservative or another liberal. And then suddenly, the Western governments are going to come out saying, look, problem solved. We got rid of the guy who was the problem. Right. So what is the response to that? Like, what are the demands that need to be made? And I know, not all of us are on the ground in Colombia, so we can't always be making those demands. But what do you think are the demands that should be made, even for us here back in the diaspora? Right, because we can't just say, "Oh, we want to get rid of Duque." It's more than just getting rid of Duque. He's not, he's not the root of the issue. It's there's a whole system, there's a whole government, there's a whole institution that really is behind all of this. So, what would y'all say is something that should be demanded by the people?
First of all, to say, Nick, that I would differentiate Uribistas and the actual conservatives, because there's a difference. We all have, Colombia is very divided politically, and it has been historically, I guess up until now, that people are realizing like the material conditions are just so bad that it kind of forces everyone to become more radical and anti-establishment. But there are two trends in Colombia, and those, well, a few trends, and one of the main ones is Uribismo, which is a conservatism which has spoken to a lot of poor people for whatever reason. I'd say the main thing is that we're miseducated politically, and it forces us to see our enemy as our friend. And so a lot of people have seen Uribe as this very tough, and also using the guerrilla. I think the guerrilla played a big part, having the guerrilla as a scapegoat, and painting the guerrilla as the main problem of Colombia, which has never been true historically. Has played a part in making people Uribista, because then Uribe, the very staunch conservative, pro-military, pro-war, kind of, I guess, similar to the stances of Trump in the United States, which is very like vulgar, very overt. We're gonna kill these guerrilleros. We're not gonna negotiate with them. And guerrillero, by the way, means everybody who's against the establishment. So any revolutionary, any activist, it doesn't necessarily mean like insurgents in las montañas or in the jungle. And so I would say that we have to differentiate between the conservatives who have something to conserve, so the people with money, the ruling class, and then the conservatively minded population, which is, is millions of us who are miseducated and I guess, victims of propaganda. And I think at this precise moment, there is a space. There's a good space for us to gain ground among that population of the Uribistas who are actually poor and who have nothing to lose in a revolution in socialism. I think the alternative and what we propose in the long term is socialism, and it has to be socialism. But anyway, that's why I think in general, and maybe Sam can elaborate a bit on what he thinks, and then we could give, I guess, a more defined or a more precise definition of what socialism would entail in Colombia, maybe.
Yeah, I think one of the points that you touched on, Uribismo, which I think is key, is Uribismo is kind of this response in the early 2000s to the general problems that Colombia was facing. At that time we have a narco trafficking trade which is creating so much violence. We have paramilitaries that are growing in numbers, and you do have guerrillas that are growing in numbers and who are with doing certain tactics that that have affected some of the population as well. And so Uribismo was kind of this response, as Carlos said, of this imaginary that the guerrilla was the main problem in the country, that if we just get rid of the guerrillas, if we just get rid of these insurgents, of these revolutionaries, then the country is going to go back to peace and everything is going to be fine. But as we can see, after the peace accords, the violence has not lessened, and if anything, it has once again picked up, due to the different paramilitary organizations that still exist in the country and that are still supported by the elite class. And I think that Uribismo today it's on its last legs. I think a lot of people are waking up, and all the protests, and basically I can't even count how many cities have signs, have written on the streets with chalk and big signs on the main streets of the cities, with anti-Uribista and in the name of the city, and a lot of the cities that I have seen in the protests have had this, and I think it goes back to this people realizing, with one of the tools, social media, and the spread of information, apart from the monopoly of the media that has been had by the elite class in Colombia, which I think is also a huge part of what is going on today. I think social media, I think the way that information is being spread is ruining Uribismo, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing what we're seeing today. As well, in terms of the demands, I did see a list of demands a couple of days ago, but I can't find it again, but I do remember one of the things that people were calling for was for international accountability for crimes against humanity, from the part of the leaders, because this is something that I'm not saying there's a media blackout, but there isn't as much information out there on the crimes that the politicians of Colombia, that the armed forces of Colombia have committed. And this goes back, to Colombia being, like you guys mentioned, the Israel of Latin America. That main stronghold that the U.S. has had in Latin America. Colombia has been constantly, since the 1920s, since Marco Fidel Suarez, has been the one country that has stood next to the U.S. no matter what. And we're seeing a lot of that today. We're seeing the response to that today.
And so the particular demands, like Sam, I have seen it, and I'll try to recall exactly the particular demands that they have. One of them is the overturning of the bill, which has happened already. They overturned it. What do you call it? For the finance minister to lose his job, and he resigned. So those are two very big victories. Go on, Sam.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention in regards to Carrasquilla, which is the Minister of Finance that just renounced, like Carlos was saying, he has been postulated to be now the president of the international, the BID, the Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C. And so we see this play of imperialism once again with Colombia. You know, he resigns. Colombia is kind of, you know, the Colombian people are giving this like, okay, he resigned. Now you guys can calm down, go back to your homes, go back to how everything was the same. But now he's being postulated for this position, which has a lot of power, and which not only has a lot of power, but which is a central position in which Colombian politicians have participated in. Duque was the main consejero for the BID, for the Inter-American Development Bank, before he became the president. He worked in DC for a long time before he became the president. And so we see this play again. And so although he did resign and that part is a victory, and the one below him also resigned, we see again, like with the bill that hasn't really been taken off the Congress floor, we see this play again with things happening but not really happening.
Yeah, those are excellent points, Sam. And you know, the important point there as well, that the reform was publicly announced as being taken down, but then as you mentioned, it hasn't really been taken down on the Congress floor. So those are just things that they do to kind of try and get the people to try and silence the people and to go back to their normal, not normal, because it's not a normal situation. It's an extreme situation. And so yeah, so those are two of the demands that I guess was somewhat victorious, but you know, we're not very hopeful on those. There's also the demands, as Sam was saying, for the police, for those involved in the violence against the protesters to be tried and to be sentenced, which, you know, is very unlikely to happen. You know, one, because there isn't really a tradition of, you know, just like in the United States with how police get away with literal murder, the same happens in Colombia. And they might put away a few tontos here and there, like you know, the foot soldiers, or the what would you call it, the lower ranking police. They might put them away. Yeah, exactly. But those who gave the orders, you know, they're going to be fine, really. If there isn't a proper revolution, if there isn't proper transformations of the structures of the governmental, political, economic structures of the country, which is which is the bigger demand, the more long-term demand is a complete overhaul of the system, which has to entail, in our opinion, socialism, a Colombian socialism, a socialism that, you know, where the political system is by and for the people, where the economic system is the same, and so on. But you know, that's the more long-term goals. I think that for now, the shorter term goals are obviously to support the protesters in what they're doing, to support the legal you know, the legal situation in terms of trying to get justice for the people that were killed, and hold those responsible for giving the orders of those killings, and putting them in prison. And also, very importantly, to say that, you know, next year there's the presidential elections, and we would encourage people as socialists, we would encourage people to support Colombia Humana, not because they're socialists. Colombia Humana is like a very liberal, I guess you could say, you know, very broadly progressive coalition of different forces. Some sectors of Colombia Humana are quite radical. I personally know a few, a section here in London who are, you know, we're talking about, you know, revolutionaries who are from Colombia, who had to flee the country because of what they were doing, you know, in terms of trying to change society. So you know, it's a broad coalition, and we also have the leader Gustavo Petro, who does very good work in terms of denouncing people like Álvaro Uribe, in terms of proposing a different situation, but who doesn't really go to the root of the structural problems that we have in terms of living under capitalist society, where the economy is run to benefit the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, the owning class, the landowners, and so on. And he thinks, I would say wrongly, that we can pacify the ruling class by, or we can have some kind of harmonial relationship with the ruling class, who have historically shown that they will never be up for sharing power or sharing wealth. But yeah, in the short term, we do support Colombia Humana's presidential campaign. I think we think it's a first step, progressive step towards change in Colombia, kind of making the conditions available so that more radical long-term proposals can be made and can be viable in society.
Yeah, so real quickly, I just want to give a shout out to everyone who's watching and following us. Don't forget to check out the GoFundMe for Red Condor. Again, those funds are going directly to those who are on the ground. Thanks to everyone who's been commenting and showing support. Escuadrista. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments now, real quick, because we're about at the 1 hour mark. So I'm not sure how much longer we'll be on, but drop any questions you have, because, this is one of the few chances you actually get to talk about with folks who actually have connections to those who are on the ground, to actually get in details about what's happening and not just read what's going on like through the New York Times or from different like The Economist. I've been seeing what they've been publishing about the issues, and it's nothing but articles about how the president, the Colombian president Duque, is doing the right thing, and he's repealed the new tax reform, so he's going in the right direction. They're gonna do nothing but praise this guy, right? In the same way that they've been doing for the past, or they've been, essentially, they don't even need to. The propaganda doesn't need to look like praising Duque. It could just be not talking about any of the issues that are happening in Colombia, not reporting on all of the deaths that occur, right? It's that propaganda of omission, which is so powerful in these situations. It's not talking about what's going on versus actually mentioning these issues, which I think is key. But in terms of that, I'm glad y'all answered those questions, especially when it comes to the demands and the victories. It's important to highlight some of the victories we have, even if they're small, right? Each victory is a step towards winning the overall battle. And I think that's important, because this is oftentimes when we hear about these issues, like especially when these like protests and rallies and uprisings pop up, we hear about the protest, we hear about the rally, we hear about the uprising, but we don't really hear about what are the end results of what's going to come out of that, right? Or what has come out of that, what has actually been produced. And when we've seen some actual things come out of this, like y'all mentioned, and who knows what's going to happen afterwards, or if these continue, what more concessions can the people get? So
I would like to just quickly announce, I just checked the GoFundMe, and we've grown by about £1,000, which is, I'm not sure what that is in dollars, probably like a thousand, maybe 30, 50 dollars. So thank you very much to everyone who's supporting here and elsewhere on social media. Just to be clear and make sure that people understand that all of that money is going to go directly to the protesters to help with the legal defense of protesters who have been unlawfully imprisoned, as well as helping medics, activists and medics who are out on the ground, helping people who have been attacked by police forces and the military forces. So, we're really appreciative. And also to mention, particularly groups that we will be funding, and which we will announce shortly on our social media, Red Condor Collective, are groups that are in the major cities where these attacks, these police aggressions and military aggressions have taken place. So that's Medellin, Cali, and Bogota. So all of that money will be split towards different groups in those cities, just so people are aware. And we will also be posting receipts as well as proof that those groups are receiving the funds. Again, as we were saying earlier, we're not an NGO. None of the money that will be donated will go to any of our pockets. We do this because we feel a duty to our country. We feel a duty as activists to support, even if we can't be in the streets in Colombia. We do have a duty here, thousands of miles away, and we see it as the least that we can do. Other things that people could do before we answer some of the questions that may be coming in is, for example, sharing information. If you go to Red Condor Collective, our organization, you can find we today published an updated infographic of the people that have been killed, disappeared, and sexually abused, and that could be shared with all your contacts, etc. If also, again, like if people have other channels and other groups that they want us to shout out that are doing similar work, we will do so. And another thing that we could do is attend protests and rallies that are taking place where we are. I'm in the UK. I've been helping to organize some events that will take place tomorrow. One of them, I guess the main one, I should say, is in Trafalgar Square in London at 3 p.m. We hope to see people there, and to make our voices heard. I think one of the plans is to go down. Trafalgar Square is not too far from Parliament Square, so one of the plans is to go down there. I don't know if you have any events in the US that you want to shout out, Sam or Nick.
Yeah, someone brought up an event tomorrow. I think Jameer brought up one of the events tomorrow is happening in NYU. We actually got someone sent this to our Instagram as well. An event, basically Uribe was supposed to get an award, an environmentalist award, in NYU tomorrow, and so now some of the students, I believe, of NYU have organized a protest, especially given what's been going on in Colombia right now. They've organized a protest against this, I guess, award ceremony. NYU, for those who don't know, is the New York University. It's a university within New York City in Manhattan. And so this is, it's typically known as a pretty prestigious university, but obviously it's a private right-wing institution. So no surprise there. That's one of the things that one of the events going on. I think there's other events going on in Portland that we're organizing with some folks down there. Some of our folks are organizing in Portland with that. I'm not sure if Samuel knows more. Those are the two I've heard about so far.
I'm not sure, Carlos. I wasn't paying too much attention on the one you were talking about. I don't know if you mentioned the Philadelphia one. I think there's one going on in Philly. Yeah, I think there's one going on in Philly. And I believe that one is, let me check my social media real quick. But I think it's either today or tomorrow that they're holding it in Philly. And I believe it's in the steps of the Rocky Balboa steps or something like that.
And
so
also to say, just keep watching our social media, Red Condor Collective, our story, as well as our posts. We'll be keeping people updated in terms of rallies and protests that they can go to as well.
Right.
And it, just to emphasize that this is all part of one collective action. The funding, protesters in Colombia, the sharing of information, and the presence at rallies, I think, should be seen as one collective thing that we should all be doing, and not one or the other. Obviously, the funding is people who have the ability to, but if you don't have the ability to, then obviously sharing would help as well, because that's the tangible, concrete support that we can give the comrades, the protesters, the activists back home.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the Philly one is tomorrow, May 5th, at 6 p.m. in front of the art museum.
Yeah.
And shout out to Viv Lee. She just gave us another one. She said there's an action happening tomorrow, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Colombian consulate in Manhattan. So that's another one. Again, we'll probably as they start coming through, we'll make a list of them and put them on our social media as they go on through the days. But for now, guide people towards this part of the video, and we'll, we got them laid out. But let's quickly get into the questions, because we still have some more to talk about.
Wait, Nick, before we go into the questions, I know Sam has some details, some updated details of what's happening in Cali. So if you can go ahead and kind of,
Yeah, I'll just run through them real quick so that we kind of have an idea of what's going on in Cali. And I wanted to focus on Cali right now because it's, everywhere there's killings going on and disappearances going on. Cali seems to be the place where most of this is happening. And so as of today, a newspaper called Q posted that there's at least 22 dead, only counting Cali. Only counting the city of Cali, there's at least 22 dead. And there's more that need to be verified. There's like Carlos was saying earlier, there's a complete militarization of Cali. I just received some messages from friends saying that the city is completely militarized. There's helicopters all over. There's thousands of soldiers arriving in the airport. One very worrying fact is that social control has now been handed over to the military forces, according to several sources. They've been saying that the general of the military has concrete orders to take control of the city in the next 24 hours, or else we will resign. And so the governor and the mayor don't have control anymore of the city, of the social situation. It's completely up to the military, and whatever the military deems necessary to keep the city under control. Yesterday in Siloé, there was at least, reports are 5 or 6 at least killed just in that neighborhood of Siloé. Siloé is one of the most marginalized, one of the most impoverished neighborhoods in the city. A lot more injured. There's a lot of videos, very graphic videos of people bodies just laying on the ground, bleeding. And then that last night, there was people weren't being able to enter into Siloé. There's a few entrances to Siloé, and people weren't being able to enter into Siloé. Human rights defenders and press wasn't being able to step in. So it's all videos from the people living in Siloé that we have available, because press wasn't able to go in. People that are filming all over the city are being threatened. 2 nights ago, Nicolás Guerrero was killed on an Instagram live video. And the person that was recording the video is now being persecuted. His social media has been hacked, and he has had to flee the city of Cali by as of today. And so he fled. And then one of the things going on last night and today was that people from Strato 5 and 6 in Ciudad Jardín, which is one of the richest neighborhoods in the city, they were coming out last night against the protesters, the people themselves of those neighborhoods. And so when you talk about a class war, these people are up there literally doing that. They are stepping outside. Last night, they were out with guns, threatening the protesters in the neighborhood of Ciudad Jardín. As well as this morning, they were out in some of the points where the protesters were. They specifically went to La Universidad del Valle, Univalle, and they were, some people were saying, let's burn down the university. Those are probably empty threats, but these things are being said by these people of higher social statuses in the city that are coming out to support the police and go against the protesters, a lot of them being armed. Another thing was the Carlos, the hotel that he was mentioning. Important to keep in mind that was done by the police. Police is also now blocking gasoline stations. I just received some news from my family. They're blocking the gasoline stations. And then there's certain parts of outside of Cali, like Rosso, where water is being turned off. People don't know why, but water is being turned off for these people. Another very worrying thing, not specifically about Cali, but the media station Blue Radio, which is part of Caracol. Yesterday, they had someone live saying that the government should turn off the internet, that the government should block access to the internet for the people so that no images were being shared. There's also witnesses in Cali saying that they are being blocked from sharing things on Facebook and online, specifically around the area of Siloé and in those areas. And again, we're seeing those same patterns that have existed in Colombia by the armed forces. We're seeing rape. We're seeing rape of people, of women, and massacres going on in the city. There's also military forces and police forces going into homes without due process, just going into the homes, taking people from their homes and taking them where people don't know where they're going. Another part is the evidence of in videos of the use of expired tear gas, which releases a different chemical than what it is supposed to release, which I think is cyanide, if I'm not wrong, which is even more dangerous and can cause death. And most of the violence that the police and the military is doing, they're doing it at night, shutting off lights, electricity, and then a lot of the killing is starting, a lot of the shooting is starting, and this is verified by videos that we've seen. But like Nick was saying, I think it's important to highlight some of the victories that have happened in Cali, because there has been some victories, and Cali is a point of resistance right now, and I've never felt more proud to be from the city of Cali, man. But some of these damn, hold on, I just got a little some of these the victories that we have is that the Paso del Comercio, which is a main street in the north of Cali, is being by some of the activists, some of the people on the ground, some of the protesters, is being renamed to Paso del Aguante, or Paso of Resistance, Paso del Aguante. I don't know how to necessarily translate that, but like a place of resistance, instead of the typical name of Paso del Comercio. Another neighborhood or point in Cali named Puerto Rellena, by activists now called Puerto Resistencia, Port of Resistance. And then La Loma de la Cruz, which is a very significant spot for all caleños. A lot of people are now naming it Loma de la Dignidad, the Hill of Dignity. And then we're also seeing a large group of bicycle riders giving aid to different points in the city, where they're riding in their bikes, no matter the dangers, no matter what's going on, handing out different aid, mutual aid for the people that are in the front line, giving up their lives for this cause. And so those are the few updates that I have. And I hope everybody really stays in tune with what's going on in the country, because it's very sad what we're going through. People in Cali are feeling a lot of pain. They're very scared. It's undescribable, the pain that the people of Cali are feeling right now because of all the massacre and the violence being caused by the state and state terrorism in Cali and elsewhere in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sam, just to re-emphasize what Sam was saying in terms of, we have to give these details of the massacres, of the terrible things that are happening, but at the same time, we do also have to be positive about the fact that there's an uprising, something that to levels that in Colombia are not usual, where the people have, I guess right now, have a very radical political consciousness due to the very terrible material conditions that they live, and even more so now because of the terrible aggression of the state authorities, of the police and military. So it's bittersweet, and as I guess as idealists, as revolutionary idealists, we welcome the situation only because it can and should bring about a long-lasting transformation of the country, and those of us in the West, here, migrants, far away from our homeland, can do something to support it. So yeah, it's not all negative. And one update that I just got as well from one of the comrades on the ground is that there was a massacre in, I'm not sure how to say this town. I don't know if you can help me, Sam. Itagüí or Itagüí?
Itagüí.
Itagüí.
Mm-hmm.
In Itagüí, the police attacked a peaceful protest, and they took kids. they're taking kids.
Yeah, so that's another thing. In Siloé, there was also one of the people murdered last night was either a 10 or 11-year-old. It's not confirmed here, but he was either 10 or 11.
So, this is an extreme situation that our people, Colombian people, are facing. The general population, including kids, imagine. And so, we can't sit cross-armed and only sharing information. We actually have to take action. But yeah, we can talk about all the things that we can do. Maybe after some questions, Nick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think Sam's update on the city of Cali answers one of the questions, which was if there's a specific region or area where the uprisings were concentrated in. You mentioned Cali. I don't know if there's any more other areas.
One very interesting area is Medellin, which is usually very conservative. Is the capital city of the department of Antioquia, which is usually very conservative. Is where Uribe is from. It's his main stronghold, and in fact the protests since the beginning have been very strong in Medellin. Students, young protesters, activists, as well as the general population, and because of it being so right wing in terms of the state, the people who control it, and the ruling class, and the capitalists and the landowners in that region, there's been a lot of violence. We see videos of protesters being shot at with live rounds in Medellin as well. So it's surprising that Medellin is one of the cities, but yeah, it's uplifting as well. It's uplifting because of it shows the kind of general mood of the Colombian society, which is not just the usual places like Bogota and the Cauca region, the Tolima region, which are usually very strong in terms of protests, but all of the country and specifically all of the major cities.
Yeah. So a little bit on that, it's Cali is where perhaps we see the majority of the massacres going on and a large part of the violence. But like Carlos was mentioning, police and the armed forces are using live rounds in a lot of cities. Armenia, Pereira. There's reports of Manizales, and so all those cities, which usually are not, those are also in the coffee region of Colombia, which usually are not known for necessarily protesting and manifesting themselves at the national level. They're risking their lives as well. They're also suffering this repression, and so yeah, those places are also worth mentioning, where a lot of this is happening. In a lot of small towns, man, there's been I don't remember which town I was seeing, but there was a small town that where the population is very small and people were also being heavily repressed by forces over there. I think there's also cities in Meta that are standing up and are also suffering violence. One city in Meta where the protesters burnt the mayor offices. The mayor came out in a video saying that those people need to pay with their lives. And so everywhere people are feeling this repression.
Just a quick detail on Meta as well. I was born in Villavicencio, which is in Meta, and it's a city. Villavicencio particularly is a city is historically very, very linked to paramilitaries, very right wing as well. I have family there who are sadly right wing too. But again, just in mind, not because they really have any material interest in being right wing, but because of the propaganda. But I got a message from one of my family members who's part of that family, who's very Uribista, traditionally all of their lives they've been Uribista, and he messaged us, my family here who are obviously very left wing, to say, for the first time I see you guys' point. And it says a lot. Being raised in a very staunchly conservative house, and to now break away from those ideas, it just shows the current mood, the current situation in the country.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to mention when you mentioned Medellin being usually conservative, like base. What I mean to me, what it says to me is there's political consciousness that's growing within the country because of what's going on, and that consciousness is I would say that in itself is another small victory for the protesters, because first of all, that's dire for Duque and his and his party, and really for the conservative ideology. That's dire when people start realizing that, what, this is actually taking me down a path that's destructive toward my community and my people. You're losing followers, right? And the people who are gaining followers are the protesters, those who are on the ground. So that's like a psychological victory that the people are winning. I think it's important also to highlight that.
100%, I agree with that, Nick. And I think in a country like Colombia, that political consciousness being brought up to people, and them realizing all these things is a huge victory, and it's not something that you can turn back. It's not something that these political classes are easily going to be able to turn back, because people are really realizing a lot of things that they hadn't before.
Right, exactly. Another question we got, and this one's interesting, is they asked, do you guys think the public might take an offensive strategy against the police and paramilitary? If I could give like my brief kind of answer to that, just what I see and from what I've heard, is it seems like people are already kind of in that offensive against the police and the paramilitary. I don't think offensives necessarily need to be like violence, like attacks. It could be, people uprising or rebelling. I remember when talking about the issues of like the Black Lives Matter protests and the uprisings that was happening here in the U.S. in certain communities, I view those as offenses against violent attacks by the police state within this nation. And it's the same in Colombia, and I would say it's the same really all over the world. When people rise up because of violent repression, that is the people's offensive. Let me know what y'all think.
Yeah, 100%. And to go along with that, people are, there's a lot of places in Cali where the armed forces have taken complete control, but there's other places where the people have taken hold. And one of those places is Melendez in Cali, where, shout out to my school where I went to, is that Melendez is a stronghold right now in Cali, where people are taking a stand and are not moving from the area. They've taken over that area of the city. And then Puerto Resistencia, I think, also has a big presence where, people are kind of holding it down. And so, yeah, people are definitely, I don't know necessarily what's going to happen today. People were very scared about what's going to happen today because of the announcement that the general of the military said that he was going to completely get rid of all protests in 24 hours. So I don't know if people, it's 3:28 right now in the US. So I don't know if people are stepping out right now. I'm going to check after we get off this live. But yeah, those two places are places where people are definitely standing up and are not leaving their spot.
Also, I wanted to add that there's a place called Tunja where they've been very organized and they've been protesting. And the interesting thing about Tunja is that there's no ESMAD. So this is the riot police you see elsewhere in the country, and there's no ESMAD in Tunja, and so Tunja has been completely peaceful. Zero murders, zero fires, zero looting, zero everything. Completely peaceful, completely fine. And so that shows that, one, the police are the ones using the violence and the aggression, and it also shows that they are the ones who incite people to burn things justifiably. I would say justifiably, because if you're being repressed, if you're being attacked, setting a governmental or police building on fire, I think is justified in that context. And so Tunja is a good example of why we shouldn't be going along with the mainstream narrative that, but there's violence on both sides. No, there's violence on one side, and there's defense. The people are defending themselves on the other side. I also want to add that we're now at $5,000, more than $5,000, which translates to nearly 20 million pesos. 20 million pesos is a lot of money in Colombia. We're hoping to divide that money to the different major cities where the aggressions, the more violent aggressions are being experienced, and that's Medellin, Cali, and Bogota. So thank you, comrades, for that. I'm not sure if I'm sure there's some of the comrades here watching us, but also the comrades on social media and elsewhere who have been sharing the GoFundMe and who are helping us and taking part, direct part in helping the situation. I see there's a question there about us still taking donations. Yes, we are. If you can see the link on our screen, you can go to that link or simply go to Red Condor Collective and go on our link tree there in our bio, and you can donate to our GoFundMe there.
So, real quick, the last question that I see we got was about the FARC. Are there still anti-FARC hit squads, and are they still active? And is the dissolution of the FARC, or at least a partial dissolution of it, inductive of a weakness in the people's struggle?
I would say, to be clear, the anti-FARC hit squads, the paramilitaries, I think is what you're referring to, are not just anti-FARC. They are anti-population in general. The paramilitary actually is an excuse by the state, by the government, to by the ruling class, I should say. The ruling class has played a direct role in creating these groups, the paramilitaries, to do work, to do things that the regular military can't get away with so easily, even though they also do fucked up stuff. But so the paramilitaries have been created by the ruling class, the capitalist ruling class, to violently suppress any type of dissent, be it armed struggle in the form of the FARC and other groups like ELN and others, but as well as university students, activists, and just the general population, even just the general population who might not even be political at all, but who might get in the way. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I would add, not to get too deep into the history of the paramilitaries, but it's also, like Carlos was said, these were created by the ruling class, along with the U.S. It was the U.S. that first proposed the paramilitaries in 1962 to be created before the FARC. So these are not, like Carlos was saying, just anti-FARC hit squads. These are paramilitary units where the U.S. was proposing for paramilitaries to literally, as the documents state, create terrorist actions against communist proponents, the documents say. And so, this means any sort of radical change in the nation, any sort of alternative movements, progressive movements that have been attacked. And from there, we have this history of the paramilitaries later developing even stronger in the 80s, 90s. And then, the history continues. Today, supposedly paramilitaries, or at least the old AUCEs don't exist anymore. The paramilitary structures don't exist anymore. But this is also another part of this erasure, this level of obscurity that exists in the country to hide these death squads, is what they are, these paramilitary death squads, which are now labeled BACRIMs, BACRIM, BACRIMs, or bandas criminales. And they're given this label to hide the fact that these are a continuation of these paramilitary death squads to create violence against anyone that is proposing any radical changes, any social transformations, any real social transformations in Colombia, in the stronghold of the U.S.
Thanks for that, comrades. And I think that was the last question we had. And I want to repeat some of the actions that are happening tomorrow. We have the actions in Philadelphia. We mentioned, what time was that at again, Samuel?
6 p.m. tomorrow in front of the Art
In
Museum.
the Art Museum, right? Yeah, so 6 p.m. tomorrow, Philadelphia. There's one coming up in Portland. We're gonna get more details on that one later. There's gonna be there's gonna be two in New York, New York City. One at 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. In front of the Colombian consulate in Manhattan. Another one at the New York University in New York City, which is going to be basically protesting the environmentalist award that was meant to be given to Uribe. And so these are some of the actions that are going on in the United States, at least. I'm sure there's going to be more going on throughout the country. We actually got hit up about one that was being organized in Germany. So we have, there are actions that are being organized all over the world in solidarity with Colombia. So keep a lookout for those. We'll also, once we get more information about them, we'll be publishing them on our social media. Someone asked real quick suggestions on resources for learning about U.S. involvement in Colombia. Besides checking,
I can answer that, Nick. I would say, the suggestion I would give is to follow Red Condor Collective and our media project, our news media project, which is Diaspora Tribune. And there we have lots of resources in terms of articles, news articles, as well as analysis pieces where we show concrete proof, data, academic research, just to show that, we're not just speaking out of our asses. And there's research behind it. There's academic research behind it. And then there's also books that we can suggest. There's also, we're here with Samuel, who leads our study group. At the moment, we're studying Marxismo en Colombia, Historias y Problemas, which is an anthology of Marxism in Colombia. This is a radical book published by radical academics in Buenos Aires, and they have to publish it in Buenos Aires because it won't be published in Colombia because of the repression, the violence that academics who are targeted by the state. Go on, Sam.
Yeah, I wanted to suggest one book that perhaps could be easy for people to get in the U.S. I think there's a lot of books in Colombia that talk about this by Colombian authors, but she's Canadian, but there's a Canadian author called Jasmine Histroff. I believe it's spelled Hristov. She writes a lot on the paramilitarization of Colombia. One of her main books, Blood and Capital, talks about these connections between capitalism, capital, paramilitaries, the creation of paramilitaries, the involvement of the U.S. in the creation of paramilitaries in Colombia, and that history also talks about Uribe. I also wanted to mention real quick, and to follow Nick, there was another action that I just got in LA. It's going to be tomorrow at 7 p.m. At Grand Park in Los Angeles. So I just wanted to point
another suggested reading as well for the person that asked about U.S. involvement in Colombia. There's a Colombian academic called Renan.
Oh man, Renan Cantor Vega, that's my man.
Renan Cantor Vega. He has an article. I'm not sure if it's an article or an essay, and I forget the title, but if you look up his name, Renan Cantor Vega, and put just the USA or something in Google, it should come up. It's a very good piece on the U.S. involvement in Colombia, and particularly around the peace process and so on. But yeah, he's a great academic in general as well. So just check out the his work. Yeah.
And someone quickly asked too about if there's any work or resources on UK involvement as well. Obviously, we know some corporations in the UK are very much involved in Colombia's economy, but yeah, any books are about the UK in Colombia?
Books, I'm not sure, but there are resources. There's an academic here in the UK called Andy Higginbottom. who's a great academic and who has spent basically his entire career examining British involvement in Colombia, as well as broader European involvement and US involvement in Colombia. But yeah, for more resources, I suggest, and more particular resources, I just suggest to DM us, so that we can, that way, we have more time to kind of find those resources and send it over to you guys.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, I don't think there's much more in terms of updating we have to add or talk about. Again, shout out to everyone who's watching us, and shout out to everyone who's been commenting and showing support. We do this again, like we talked about earlier. This is really to give education and to inform people about some of the things that are going on, because like we've said, there's a media blackout right now on the issues of Colombia, not just Colombia, but really all throughout Latin America. Whenever main things or big issues happen, there's a complete media silence and blackout. And not only is there a media silence and blackout, but there's also anytime that it is reported, it's all misinformation. They'll give one or two articles about, oh, there's these protests that happen, but they're not that big of a deal. Meanwhile, in actuality, the whole country is almost shut down, right? Cities are completely closed. So there's a lot. What's going on right now is extremely important. I remember when we were organizing a solidarity. This was before Andres Arauz was, before the election in Ecuador. We were organizing a solidarity rally here in where I'm at in Jersey, and with the Citizens Revolution campaign from Ecuador. And we had some Afro-Colombians come, and they were talking about some of the killings that were going on in Buenaventura. And they read a list of the names of the children who were murdered by the police state. So this isn't something that is like new. This isn't something that just started happening this week. This has been going on for months, right? That was back in April. So this has been going on for months now. And it's really, to talk about a media blackout, it's been happening, and no one has really been talking about it nearly as much as they should. So this is why we're doing these sorts of lives and giving out this information. Is there anything else y'all want to talk about or say to close out?
Just the final thing. Sorry, go on, Sam. You go first.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's like you guys have been mentioning, helping the Colombian population out with this GoFundMe to be able to distribute to the people on the ground, risking their lives. I think also it's very important, as Nick was mentioning, there's a media blackout. There's like I was mentioning earlier, the people that are filming are being threatened, and they're scared for their lives. But they're still going out there, and I think it's very important for everybody to be sharing, to be sharing on their social medias, to bring international attention to this, because this is a very important part of keeping people safe, as well as getting that international pressure on the Colombian state to stop these massacres.
Thank you, Sam, and just to close out, I would say thank you to everyone who's watching, and thank you to everyone who's donated in the last hour or so, the last couple of hours. It means a lot, and not just because not just from us as an organization, but for the people of Colombia. This is a direct action. People like to talk about direct action, and it's usually perceived to be just going out on the streets and protesting, which is important, and we encourage as well as complementary. But from where we are, sending support for those on the front line, tangible, concrete financial support for those people is amazing, and yeah, so thank you for that. And for those of us who are listening from the UK, particularly from London, I'd encourage people to come out tomorrow if you can to Trafalgar Square at 3 p.m. I know there's some people are going to meet at the consulate as well, though there's talks and suggestions of joining the two groups together. And I think the bigger group, as we stand at the moment, is the Trafalgar Square group. So I think some of us are going to go to the consulate to try and get those people to come down to Trafalgar Square with us as well. But yeah, and then just keep an eye out on our social media, Red Condor Collective, for updates of actions, rallies, and stuff wherever you guys are, and keep donating and sharing our GoFundMe. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Nick, for your time and for all the information, for keeping us informed, and for keeping updated, so that we can inform people about this serious but at the same time very positive situation in terms of our attempts, the people's attempts at transforming a country that's historically been so oppressed. So yeah, thank you, comrades.
Thank you all.
Great. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Take care, comrades.
Yeah.